Hello, I'm your host, Brian Calania. As the world celebrates Earth Day this April, a key environmental policy in Washington faces a major test from a statewide initiative.
The CCA will benefit everyone in Washington state.
The 2021 CCA, or Climate Commitment Act, requires top polluters to pay for their emissions by buying allowances at quarterly auctions.
This is a fight for our future. This is a fight for our kids' future.
Over time, as the cap on pollution comes down.
Since it went into effect last year, the Cap and Invest program has brought in more than $1.8 billion, which goes towards programs aimed at fighting the effects of climate change.
Companies that build clean technologies are eager to locate here, and companies that are already here are investing in decarbonizing their operations.
But opponents of the CCA say it's hurting, not helping our state.
The Climate Commitment Act is responsible for Washington's gas prices being 50 cents to $1 more expensive than gas prices in every other state.
Mega donor Brian Haywood is funding the group Let's Go Washington, which collected more than 400,000 signatures to get a CCA repeal measure on the ballot this November.
This hidden gas tax, we knew it was there, we knew people were upset, but the upset was building.
The governor says a repeal would only benefit fuel suppliers, already making record profits.
We're not going to succumb to the big oil companies that are trying to destroy our pollution laws in the state of Washington.
And if the CCA goes away, the state says we'll lose a key tool for carbon compliance.
What doesn't go away is the mandate that our emissions get down to net zero by 2050. We know as a state, as a country, as a world, that we need to take action to reduce climate impacts.
The debate over global warming heats up.
The people really have demanded we do something about this.
If we pass the initiative, then we allow unlimited pollution in the state.
The poorest, brownest Washingtonians are the people that breathe the worst air.
Average people don't like having the money taken away from them.
Analyzing Initiative 2117, next on City Inside Out. And to learn more about this issue, we have a panel with us that includes State Representative Jim Walsh, the Republican from the 19th District in Aberdeen, the author of 2117. Good to have you here.
Great to be here.
We also have with us House Majority Leader Joe Fitzgibbon. He is the Democratic representative of the 34th District in West Seattle area. Joe, good to have you as well.
Thanks, Brian.
And also we have with us Paula Sardinas, CEO of the Washington Build Back Black Alliance. Paula, good to see you.
Good to be here.
And also we have with us Glen Morgan, founder of the media outlet We the Governed. Glenn, good to have you as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's jump into this. And Representative Walsh, if you could, give us a brief opening statement and make the case, if you would, for Initiative 2117. Why did you write this measure? What would it do if it were passed?
Right. I-2117 repeals the cap-and-trade tax scheme that we call the Climate Commitment Act here in Washington. The problem with this system, with this program, is that it promises to reduce carbon outputs, carbon pollution, and doesn't do that. What it does do is it raises a bunch of tax revenue for the state of Washington in the billions that's paid for primarily by middle-class working families who need to put fuel in their vehicles, who need to heat their homes, and are paying an indirect tax in the cost of gasoline, the cost of diesel fuel, the cost of any kind of carbon-based fuel to do the daily things of life.
Okay.
And it's affecting the cost of groceries because you have to truck groceries into grocery stores. It's affecting utility bills of all sorts, whether you're natural gas or not. And the people really have demanded we do something about this.
Okay.
It was the most popular of a group of initiatives that we qualified recently.
Yeah, we'll talk about those signatures in just a little bit. But Representative Fitzgibbon, why are you saying no to 2117?
Sure. So Initiative 2117 would allow unlimited pollution in Washington state. It eliminates the cap on Washington's pollution that is starting to work to protect Washingtonians' health. It allows the pollution that harms our lungs, that harms our climate, that harms our landscapes, that harms salmon. And at the same time as eliminating all of those caps on pollution and allowing unlimited pollution, it does away with funding for things like food security for the hungriest people in our state, for wildfire suppression and prevention, for salmon recovery, for investments in traffic safety, and for the equipment that we need to actually monitor our air quality and ensure that we're making progress towards improving the health of people in our state. So at the same time as we allow unlimited pollution, we do away with a lot of things that are really important to the people of our state and protecting their health.
Thank you for that. Paula, let me ask you why the black business community is at the table on this issue.
Well, we are at the heart of the pollution matter. The poorest, brownest Washingtonians are the people that breathe the worst air. And we know we've been talking about this for nearly 50 years, right? Those dollars mandate that 35% of these investments go to those overburdened communities. And so we're talking about respiratory illnesses like asthma. We know that life expectancy with COVID has decreased 3 years in the black and brown community. We're talking free transportation for children under the age of 18, repairing roads, investing in things like community gardens, decarbonizing housing, making that housing that we build today more affordable, but making sure that those housing opportunities that we're building, that they are environmentally friendly. And so for the first time in a generation, I'm 51, we are leaving our children a better planet than the one that we've got. So we're saying it is not a binary choice. Vote no to rolling back on these environmental protections.
Okay, thank you. Glenn, I know you've studied this issue with We the Government, and I wanted to get your take on this because we're hearing this week that companies like Amazon, a major carbon footprint from that company, BP runs the largest oil refiner in our state, some of our biggest polluters, I guess you'd say, are saying no to 2117. They support the Climate Commitment Act. And 3 years ago, when the CCA went into effect, it was held up as an example of when advocates, big polluters, tribes, a lot of people came together to deal with climate change. I just wanted to talk about all the support that this No campaign has right now and all the support that went into brokering this deal initially with the CCA. Why do you think voters should tear that apart?
Well, I think it's not a hard one, actually, as somebody volunteered actually collecting signatures out there in Seattle and other places around Washington. And people basically don't like the fact that their taxes are going up and that government's telling them that they can spend the money better than they can. And so they're essentially spending a lot more on gas and heating their home and then giving that money to multi-billion-dollar corporations like you just named, and then presuming that the tax benefit that they get from their back pocket, you're basically taking money from the poorest people in the state and you're giving it to billionaires and other companies so that they can spend that money better than supposedly you can. And, you know, I noticed that the people who are supporting the opposition campaign include people like Bill Gates and other billionaires. And so if they really think these are great programs, they should fund them directly. They clearly have the resources to do it. They shouldn't be trying to take the money from poor people and then basically make it easier for some of their investments to profit for themselves. And so I think it's really clearly something that average people don't like, having the money taken away from them and the government telling them they can spend it better.
Got it. And let's try to dive into some of these issues. Representative Fitzgibbon, I'll draw you in here. So when the CCA passed in 2021, Governor Inslee said it would result in pennies more at the gas pump for consumers. And I know you've heard this argument here because as it turned out, drivers saw prices go above $5 a gallon in the summer of 2022 and 23. And still today, Washington State is more than $1 over the national average price per gallon. Supporters of 2117 would say the reason why is fuel suppliers are paying more for the Climate Commitment Act. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, all Washingtonians are experiencing high costs of housing, of food, of health care, of energy, and that's something that people are struggling with, and we just have to be upfront about that. Unfortunately, Washington and the entire West Coast have always had higher gas prices than the rest of the country, and 2022 is a great example. The highest gas prices we've ever seen in Washington were in the summer of 2022, before the Climate Commitment Act took effect. The Climate Commitment Act didn't take effect until January of 2023.
That's right.
But the historic high that we've ever seen in gas prices happened a few months after Russia invaded Ukraine. Now we see these geopolitical incidents that cause huge volatility in the price of gasoline, which is why it's so important that Washingtonians have better choices than being tied to those global oil markets, which we're providing through the Climate Commitment Act, through investments in things like free transit for people who are under 18, through expanded electric vehicle charging, through investments in biofuel infrastructure. So we don't have to be tied to what's going on in the Persian Gulf, what's going on in Russia, what's going on in Venezuela, as we historically have been.
Representative Walsh, maybe a reaction to that, and Paula, I'll draw you in.
Yeah, sure. People don't care about Ukraine or Venezuela. People care about their household budgets.
Okay.
People care about what gas costs at the
But
pump.
you don't think that's connected to gas prices?
Well, I mean, everything's connected to everything.
Okay.
The biggest cost driver in the last couple of years of the price at the pump here in Washington has been this cap-and-trade tax scheme. And it's leaking over into things like utility bills. People are beginning to see their utility bills go up. And we've seen a lot of dodgy behavior on the part of some elected officials in Olympia, not Joe, and not me, but others who've been hiding the effects of this cap-and-trade scheme on utility bills. And that's bad stuff. And people have a good sense that it's bad stuff, and they want change.
Okay. Paula, you had something you wanted to say.
I wanted to put a bookend on that because what Representative Fitzgibbon said is absolutely true. And it's just a false narrative. There was $4 gas in Florida. They don't have cap and trade. It was in 2022. You know what happened there? Hurricanes. You know what causes hurricanes? Environmental justice. There was $4.60 gas in Texas in 2022. You know what happened there? Tornadoes. These were large Republican-run states. When you have geopolitical crisis, it drives up the cost of gas. In 2022, you also had $3 and $4 gas in California. After they passed CARB in 2013, gas prices actually went down in California for nearly a decade. These are not my facts. These are on the EPA's website. You can look it up. Okay. Whenever you have geopolitical crisis, gas prices are cyclic. So it was not just Washington State that experienced the gas spikes that happened across the country in both blue and red states. Okay. These are geopolitical issues. These are not cap and trade issues.
Glenn, maybe I can have you respond to this because I got some numbers from the State Department of Ecology about this too, because when this allowance auction program started in 2023, allowance prices and gas prices were both rising, right? But now, even as allowance prices have dropped this year by 50%, gas prices are still going up. They're 32 cents, I should say, higher since the last auction ended on March 13th. So here we are in mid-April recording this program. We're about 27 cents higher than we saw in our state last year. So I'm trying to figure this out here with all that in mind. I mean, how much do you trust that gas prices will significantly drop, that oil companies, which are making record profits, are somehow going to change their ways if the CCA is repealed?
Well, there's no doubt that you're paying more for fuel as a direct result of other things as well as taxes. But taxes are the thing that you can actually control. And so eliminating the costs, the extra costs that you're burdening average people with, as just some kind of a kickback scheme to vendors and special interests who basically sign on to it. You have billions of dollars that the legislature likes to, or politicians like to be able to direct to their special interests, preferably those who are giving them campaign contributions, or billionaires like Bill Gates, who does make that he's clearly investing in this opposition to this initiative. It's not a hard thing to communicate to people that the government's not going to spend the money that you give them better than you will, and you need that money, especially right now with inflation. So I think finding ways to reduce the cost of living for average people and not divert that cash out of their pocket into the pocket of special interests is something that most people really do appreciate.
I did want to focus on the climate piece of it, though, because our state has goals to be carbon-free by the year 2050, and if not using the CCA as a tool, what tool would you use to get to that?
Well, number one, I would stop burning our forests, which is largely done through basically incompetent forest management, which Washington's had now for about 50 years. As a small farm forestry person myself, I can tell you that if you want to find incompetence in forest management, come to Washington, because we put on classes on how to demonstrate how to burn our forests up that's simply a direct result of bad government policy. It's not a hard one. That dumps more carbon in the air than almost anything else. And if you want to have bad quality air in Washington, see what happens when you burn your forests up.
Transportation, though, is a huge piece of it, and fossil fuels, right? I mean, I think that's a big piece of what the CCA is trying to go after here.
Well, they say that, but the problem is if you actually look at how the money gets diverted, it always gets diverted into companies that conveniently are making a lot of money off, and basically they're profiting on the backs of little people, basically taking their money, taking $1,000 a year extra in fuel costs. If it was so great, then Bob Ferguson wouldn't have threatened Puget Sound Energy with litigation if they actually revealed on the bill how much their energy costs were actually going up every bill that came out.
Okay. Did you have a response you wanted to throw to that, Representative Fitzgibbon? I just want to make sure I was given equal time here.
I don't think it's an accident that the Climate Commitment Act passed in 2021 when less than 6 months before that we saw 2 and 3 weeks of choking smoke throughout the entire state, not just in areas on those front lines that have been most impacted by wildfires, but everybody in the whole state was choking on smoke. Yeah. At the same time as we were supposed to stay outside to avoid COVID, we were also trying to avoid going outside because of how smoky it was. We were seeing those impacts of climate change already, and I think that really catalyzed Washingtonians and legislators into saying we need to do more. We need to find funding to fight fires and to prevent fires, but also we need to get to the root cause of the heat that's causing our forests to be more vulnerable to those kinds of fire events.
And a lot of that smoke came from British Columbia. Yeah. And a lot of the carbon pollution, the fossil fuel pollution that we're concerned about comes from farther away than British Columbia. Okay. Comes from India, comes from China. It's kind of arrogant to think that Washington State, by passing a cap and trade tax scheme, is going to single-handedly change the carbon outputs that are a global phenomenon. What we ought to do is engage the real polluters, which Washington State is not, about better environmental policy in their backyards.
Well, they are engaging people like BP. I mean, we talk about the largest oil refinery in our state, BP, and they're the group that's saying no to 2117.
Well, because they're self-interested. They're getting money from the scheme.
And they're trying to create some green fuels, et cetera, right?
Well, what we need to do is, if we're going to tackle a global issue, we need to have a global reach. And penalizing working families in Longview, in Kent, and Auburn, and Whidbey Island is not the solution to a climate disaster that's caused by Bangalore and Shekwang province.
I really do see the state of Washington, though, reaching out to other places like California and Quebec, for example, to try to build what they're trying to do with this cap and trade system here. And I can see that reach, but if it doesn't start with our state, then we couldn't get to that larger reach in the first place. Do you see that grow?
But the linkage will work the wrong way. I mean, the market for these indulgences that are auctioned off by bureaucrats, permissions to pollute, is inefficient in its DNA. And that's the reason why the proponents of the scheme are trying to grow their way out of the losses. It's like we're losing efficiency in our system here, but if we grow bigger, we'll gain efficiency somehow. There's no indication that's true.
But Representative Walsh, I would say this. I think when we start talking in these esoteric platitudes, what we do is we confuse people, we confuse voters.
They're not confused, Paula. They want to overturn this cap.
They are, because what we don't do and what we have done with the WBBA is we've gone to people and we've sat down at their kitchen tables and we have explained this in a way that makes sense. What we've said to them is, think about it when he says, you know, we're doing linkage and it's a scheme. It's not a scheme. You know, middle-class person, how do you get your packages? You order them through Amazon, right? They come through these little vans. Well, that's an MHD. Part of what cap and trade has done is these medium to heavy-duty vehicles, we are replacing those with electric vehicles. The number one emitters of GHG gases are these vehicles that are traveling up and down your roadways every single day. Yeah. Do you know who lives among I-5 in these corridors? They are your poorest people and they're your middle-class people. Yeah. They live in Kent, they live in Seattle, they live in Tacoma, they live in the CID. And so if you want to reduce pollution, you have to take these MHDs off of the roads. You have to reduce the number of fossil fuel vehicles that are traveling. That's what companies like Amazon are doing. They're reducing those vehicles. They're reducing the size and they're electrifying their fleets. These dollars are being invested in the TES, the Transportation Electrification Strategy, to reduce those number of vehicles so that Washington, like California, by 2030 and 2050 can electrify the state. It is not a scheme. We're saying we believe your life is worth saving. That is going to overall reduce your cost. And that's what, when we start talking in these lofty terms so that people don't understand it, we think we're giving them a binary choice, and then we're taking those dollars and we're reinvesting those in those working class communities with those people.
And Paula, I just want to make sure I broadened it out, because the CCA has brought in $1.8 billion so far from these auctions. And I know the governor said to take away that money would be a torpedo to the state budget. And I wanted to talk about just some of the different programs. You talked about electrifying some different vehicles. We're talking about a program that pays for utility bills for some low-income people.
$320 million.
Free transit for kids. Farmers get help pay for fuel. Tribes like the Quinault Indian Nation can create ecosystem restoration projects. I just wanted to talk about some of the different people that are benefiting from these projects, so we lay that out there, and we'll get some input on that
There
as
are
well.
grants that Commerce has just put out that are doing salmon recaptures right now. That grant is going out. We just did $85 million for charging infrastructure in the Tri-Cities, which is an area of Washington State that is a heavily Republican district where no one in that district supported CCA. You know, more than $20 million is going into charging infrastructure out there so that, again, you're going to have electric buses, but you're also going to have charging stations at their public transit. So areas where you normally don't have public transportation, that will be electrified.
Okay.
Meaning you're going to have electric cars so that there are nonprofits and there are CBOs out there. You can go and you can get the little electric car. WashDOT put out a grant. It's called the ZAP grant. You get the car, now you have a way to charge it.
Okay.
So people in community, people that don't speak English, people that don't normally have transportation, you can get a car, now you have a way to charge it and get that infrastructure. If you repeal CC, all of that goes away. You have transportation deserts in community. That's what these dollars pay for in Benton Franklin County.
Got it. Glenn, maybe I can bring you in here because there's clearly a push by the CCA to help out overburdened communities. I've heard that phrase
And
used.
underserved communities.
And underserved communities also feeling the effects of climate change the most here. Let me know about that. Advocates would say repealing the CCA would really strike a blow there, as Paula is bringing up. What do you think?
Well, I mean, extracting cash from people and then saying, here, I'm going to give you some of the money back that I took from you is not exactly an efficient way of explaining to somebody. If I come to your house, say, let me give me $1,000 and I'll give you $100 back. You know, that's how government tends to operate, these tax schemes. You can solve the same goals if they make sense without having to tax people for it. You have multi-billion-dollar corporations and billionaires who frankly have the ability to fund all these operations by themselves, but instead have chosen to fund them on the backs of just average low-income people. I'm on the board of the State Farm Bureau as well, and I was just at our board meeting and we officially endorsed 2117 there, and there was no doubt at all in it because the thousands of farmers in Washington State don't want to pay more in taxes that keep getting imposed on them because that, like everything else, gets cooked, it gets sent down the food chain and people are paying more. It adds to the inflation. Government is never going to spend its money better than you, especially when they're basically involved in picking winners and losers and giving kickbacks to special interests who have given them contributions or donations or they have political influence.
And the farmers don't like this cap and trade scheme at all. They were promised an exemption from the taxes for their fuel, and then the bureaucrats of the Department of Ecology basically reneged on that promise and said, no, we don't have any plan for giving you that money back or exempting you from that money in the first place.
Okay.
And then once we shined a light on that, then Ecology started backpedaling and said, okay, we'll come up with some kind of plan to credit farmers.
Okay.
But it was a messy business, and there's no doubt that farmers around the state don't like the cap and trade scheme at all. And this is not a Republican-Democrat issue. The people who supported 2117, the 400, almost 500,000 Washingtonians who signed the petitions, cross all political lines, they cross all demographic lines. They were Republicans and Democrats, they were independents, they were white, they were black, they were Asian, they were Hispanic. It is supported across the board by Washingtonians.
I want to make sure you jump in, please.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll find out this November. Right? We have dairy farmers in Sunnyside who oppose the initiative because we're seeing investments from the CCA in sustainable dairy farming practices. We have firefighters in Morton and Lewis County opposing the initiative because of how the initiative would defund our forest health investments and our wildfire response. We have the Squamish tribe opposing the initiative because of how the initiative would defund our salmon recovery efforts. We have $25 million that we allocated for nuclear energy. We're not just talking about biofuels and wind and solar. We're also talking about nuclear energy, clean technologies that Washington has really led the world on and can lead the world on in the future. That we invested in this year's budget to grow the technology related to small modular reactors. So, but what we know for sure is that if we pass the initiative, then we allow unlimited pollution in the state and we defund all of those programs.
Okay. We need to start wrapping up here, and this has been a great conversation. I thank you. Maybe I can ask you, Paula, just some final words for voters considering their choice over 2117.
Absolutely. I would say to voters that, you know, we hear you. We hear your pain points, and what we've heard for too long is that your health can no longer wait. That people have to be placed over the interests of politics and special interests. So I think everybody at the table agrees. I hear what Glen's saying. I hear what Chairman Walsh is saying. The people have spoken, and the people have said that we can't wait another day to solve the issue of climate injustice, that it was now or never, and the people chose now.
Got it.
And they're saying no. vote no on 2117.
Got it. Glenn, some final thoughts, if you can keep it to less than a minute, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a hard thing to explain to people. If you vote yes, then you're going to pay less, and you're going to pay less on your power bill and your fuel. So that's not a difficult thing for average people to understand, which is why it was so easy collecting signatures on this initiative, just as a volunteer when I was doing it. And I only did it a few times in a number of places around the state. The average people don't like paying more, and they don't like paying more into opaque schemes, and especially when government tells them that things that they pretended they were funding before now is going to suddenly go away because you're taking this new windfall of another $1.5 billion into the kitty, and that you deserve to pay another $1,500 to them every year. That's just too much. I think average people, they want to keep their money.
Got it. Representative Walsh, we've got here in April already $11 million is poured into the No campaign. We talked about Bill Gates donating $1 million to this already. I know there's going to be a lot of talk about this, and how do you see this play out? Is it going to be more fundraising to counter? Some final thoughts here, please.
Well, the yes campaign for 2117 is easier than the no campaign. All we have to do is be straightforward and tell the truth about what the initiative will do, which is help working families and regular people all around the state with their cost of living. So we've got the straight arrow approach here. The ones who are arguing no, they've got to make a more convoluted, complex argument. And they're going to have to raise a lot more money than they've raised to convince people that, that this good reform is somehow not good.
We will see. Are you concerned about that group that's coming together here when we talk about BP and all these other groups coming together?
No. They're gonna defend the scheme that they like, that benefits them, and that's the system. They're welcome to do that.
Okay.
But in the end, I think truth will prevail.
All right. I'd like to give you the final word here, if I could, Representative Fitzgibbon, just to wrap this up.
Sure. You know, I think that Washingtonians are proud of the fact that we've led the nation, that we've led the world in fighting climate change. Don't want to see us take a big step backwards by allowing more pollution that harms all of our health, but particularly the health of our seniors, of our kids, of people with respiratory ailments. That allowing the more pollution into our lungs and into our homes and into our air is not the step that Washingtonians are going to want to take this fall. I think that's why you see so much support for the No campaign. So many people don't want to see us roll the dice on our health and on our climate for our kids and for generations to come.
All right. Thank you all for this input, and we will be right back. What are people saying on social media about I-2117, which would repeal the Climate Commitment Act? One group writes, the CCA goes about transitioning to cleaner energy sources the wrong way. Another group comments, vote no on 2117 to protect our clean air and water, forests and farmland, jobs and transportation investments. We can't afford it. We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on social media. Thank you for that input. Thank you for your input as well. And we will see you next time on City Inside Out.